I said, "Unlock it now," screamed a furious voice behind the wooden gate, loud enough to startle the birds off the pine trees around the lake. It was Janet Morrison, the HOA president, her perfectly manicured fingers rattling the padlocked door to my ranch leg cabin like a spoiled child denied candy. Her face was flushed red, sunglasses on her head tilted crookedly, and behind her were 8 confused guests in pastel summer outfits, holding folding chairs, coolers, and selfie sticks. She banged her fist on the cabin's deck railing. "I told you my friends were using this place today. Open it." I stood firmly on the steps, arms crossed, the cabin key ring tucked in my jean pocket. "No, Janet, this is private property, not part of the HOA, and definitely not open to your party." Her eyes bulged. "Excuse me, you're going to regret this?" Janet spun around, whipped out her phone, and started recording. "This is illegal. This man is obstructing an HOA-sanctioned event," she yelled. "You're all witnesses. This will be on record." The guests exchanged glances, clearly unsure what they had walked into. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her and waited. What happened next was even worse than I expected. Let me back up a bit and tell you how we got here. My name's Cole Anderson. I'm 42, a quiet ex-military guy turned woodworker. About 3 years ago, I bought this 20-acre ranch out in Wyoming. It had everything I needed: trees, quiet, and a small lake with a cabin sitting right at the edge. I was never big on neighborhoods. Grew up in one of those towns where your neighbor's business was your business. And trust me, it got annoying real quick. So when I bought this ranch, it was on purpose. Secluded, peaceful, no neighbors, no problems. Or so I thought. See, about a mile down from my land is an upscale housing development. One of those communities with white fences, golf carts, tennis courts, and of course, an aggressive homeowners association. I didn't know they were that close when I moved in. Their main road brushes the edge of my eastern fence, and though my land isn't part of their HOA, I made sure of that before buying. It didn't stop them from trying to pretend it was. At first it was little things. HOA flyers stuck in my gate, invitations to community meetings. Janet, their president, dropped by with a pie once, smiling sweetly while asking, "Have you considered joining the association? It would really help us keep the area cohesive." I said no politely. Then she came again and again until finally I told her, "I'm not joining, Janet. Please stop asking." That was 6 months ago. Since then, she's tried everything. She sent fake notices saying my fence was too tall, complained about my old pickup being a visual hazard to HOA members driving by, even tried to claim my ranch road was an HOA easement. Every time I told her the same thing, "My land is not yours, go away." Then came Memorial Day weekend. It started harmlessly. I was sitting on the porch with my dog Buck, a golden retriever with more sense than most people I know, when a line of SUVs drove slowly past my front gate. I watched sipping coffee as they disappeared toward the lake path, a narrow trail I carved through the woods years ago. I frowned. No one ever went that way because that path led straight to the cabin. I hadn't used the cabin in weeks, but I always kept it locked and stocked. It was my private hideaway. My late father and I built it together with our own hands, and no one, not even family, got access without asking. I stood, told Buck to stay, and hopped on my ATV. By the time I got to the lake, my jaw nearly hit the dirt. There were people everywhere. Inflatable tubes floated lazily across my lake. Someone had started setting up a Bluetooth speaker on the dock. A pair of teenagers were already climbing my fishing platform like it was a jungle gym. And there in the middle of the chaos was Janet, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat, sipping sparkling water from a pink tumbler. She was waving her hand like a queen addressing her subjects. I killed the engine and stormed up. "Janet, what the hell is this?" "Oh, hi, Cole," she chirped like we were best buddies. "Isn't this just lovely? I thought your cabin would make the perfect Memorial weekend retreat for my guests." "Your guests?" "Yes," she said calmly. "The HOA members voted to host this year's board bonding here. It's just one weekend. We'll clean up after ourselves." I laughed loud and hard. "You don't have permission. This is my land. You're trespassing." Janet blinked. "Oh, I assumed you'd be cooperative. After all, we all live in the same community." "No, we don't. She frowned. Well, can you at least unlock the cabin? It's rather warm out here, and I promised some of the ladies they could freshen up indoors. I took a step closer. You've lost your mind. That's when her smile dropped. This will go on record, she said flatly. You're being very difficult. This kind of behavior reflects poorly on you. Get off my property. The guests, now visibly uncomfortable, began packing their things. A couple of them mouthed sorry as they walked past me toward their cars. The teens scurried off the dock. Even the woman with the speaker unplugged and tiptoed away. All except Janet. She stood there trembling with a mix of fury and disbelief. This isn't over, Cole. I shrugged. It never started. Then I pointed at the gate. Move. She did, but not before whispering something into her phone. And that's when the real trouble began. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget, this story is just getting started because what happened the next morning left me speechless. The next morning, I stepped outside with a cup of coffee in one hand and Buck trotting by my side like usual. The sun was barely over the hills and the dew on the grass shimmered in the light. I could still smell the smoke from last night's fire pit near the cabin. After everything that happened, I sat out there for a while thinking. I thought Janet's madness had ended when she stormed off with her guests, but I should have known better. As I approached my front gate, something caught my eye. A bright orange notice was pinned to the wooden post near my mailbox. I pulled it off, unfolded it, and nearly choked on my coffee. It was an official-looking document stamped urgent HO notice. It read unauthorized structure in violation of Neighborhood Code 14A. Immediate access to community facilities must be granted or HOA reserves right to enforce access for public benefit. What? First of all, there was no neighborhood code, at least not for me. I wasn't part of the HOA. I made sure my ranch was legally excluded when I purchased it. Secondly, my lake cabin wasn't an unauthorized structure. It was built on my land with my money under my name and under a full county permit. This was madness. Buck growled lowly as I scanned the paper again, spotting a signature at the bottom. Janet Morrison, HOA president. Oh, you've lost your mind, I muttered. I tore up the notice and went back inside. That morning, I made 3 phone calls. My real estate lawyer, Mr. Clay, who assured me that Janet had zero authority over my ranch, the county office to reconfirm my property boundaries and rights, which they emailed to me again, and finally the sheriff's department. The sheriff on duty chuckled when I explained the situation. You're not the first rancher she's tried to mess with, but you're the only one who hasn't caved. She left with guests yesterday and sent this threat the next morning. I don't trust her anymore, I said. I'm just giving a heads up. If she steps foot on my land again, I want it on record. He assured me he'd file a note just in case. After lunch, I hopped in my truck and drove down to town for supplies. Buck rode with me, head out the window, tongue wagging in the breeze. While I was away, I kept thinking about the lake cabin, how she knew the trail, how she acted like she owned it. Something wasn't sitting right. By the time we got back, the sun was dipping low behind the hills. I pulled through the gate and hit the brakes so hard the tires kicked dust up around us because there she was. Janet again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had a man with her, tall, bald black sunglasses, clipboard in hand. He wore a neon safety vest and stood near the cabin path as if inspecting something. My eyes darted to the gate camera. The red light was flashing. Good, it recorded everything. I parked, slammed the truck door shut, and marched over. You really can't stop, can you? Janet smiled sweetly like we were meeting at a book club. Cole, this is Greg. He's an external safety inspector we hired to assess lake access paths. Some of the HOA board members expressed concerns about potential hazards on your trail. On my what? Your trail? The one you've selfishly cut off from the rest of us? Greg stepped forward, clearing his throat. I've been asked to survey this trail and evaluate it for safe community use. No, sir. You've been misled, I snapped. This is my land. This trail is privately owned. This cabin is privately owned. You're trespassing, both of you. Janet's eyes widened. You can't be serious. You're hoarding natural resources. This is a community treasure. This is my property, I shot back. You're welcome to treasure it from the other side of the fence. Janet's face twisted into something animalistic. She whipped out her phone again, recording me as she turned it on herself. HOA president here, dealing with yet another uncooperative and abusive homeowner who refuses to participate in community harmony. This is what selfishness looks like, folks. She pointed the camera at me, zooming in dramatically. I smiled because I had something she didn't. I turned and pointed at my mounted gate camera. Smile, Janet. You're on my property being recorded without permission, issuing fake violations and bringing unauthorized inspectors. Greg immediately backed up, looking around nervously. I was told this was public. Nope, I said. You've just been part of a very clear trespassing incident. Hope your job's worth it. I didn't sign up for this, he mumbled and walked off, practically speed walking back to his car. Janet wasn't done. She stomped forward, getting too close for comfort. You think you've won, Cole? You're just a cranky old man with a dying ranch. I'm HOA president. I decide what happens in this neighborhood. Not here, you don't. Oh, you'll see. She stormed off again, but this time she didn't whisper into her phone. She shouted, I'm coming back tomorrow with a real legal order. And true to her word, the next day she returned, but not alone. This time she brought reinforcements, and what they did made my blood boil. Didn't sleep well that night. Something about the way Janet shouted that final threat. It rang different, like she had something bigger in the works. And knowing her, that scared me more than I wanted to admit. By sunrise, I was already outside pacing the porch with Buck watching me like I'd lost my mind. My gut said she'd come back, but I didn't know how or with who. So I did what any reasonable ex-military ranch owner would do. I prepared. First, I locked the cabin tighter than Fort Knox. Steel padlock, window latches double-checked. Then I updated the motion sensor cameras on the trail and made sure my wireless feed was active from the house. I wasn't taking chances. Not with Janet. I even typed up a no trespassing notice, printed it, and stapled it on the trail entrance in big red letters. Under it, I added, this land is privately owned and protected under state property law. Violators will be prosecuted. By 10 a.m., the wind picked up. Clouds rolled in. Buck weed near the fence gate, and that's when I heard it. The hum of multiple engines, then tires on gravel, then yelling. I ran to the gate and froze. 4 cars, a white van, a shiny black sedan, 2 SUVs with magnetic HOA logo slapped on the side. Out stepped Janet, of course, in full beige pants, suit, and heels like she was on her way to a boardroom, not a ranch. She was holding a thick folder in one hand and a loudspeaker in the other. Behind her were 2 HOA board members I recognized from past community invitation letters. Steve, the sweaty one who always wore cargo shorts, and Marlene, who looked like she smelled lemons every time she talked. But the real surprise, there was a man in uniform, a rent-a-cop, security guard, flashy badge, but no actual law authority. He had his arms crossed in mirrored sunglasses that reflected the tension in the air. Buck started barking. I stepped forward. Janet, what is this? She lifted the megaphone like she was leading a parade. Attention. Under Article 7B of the HOA Extended Access Rules, we hereby demand entry to the ranch cabin for official community functions. I nearly choked on my own spit. There is no Article 7B, I shouted. You made that up. This is a formal notice. We will now proceed to the cabin. She nodded at the guard. He hesitated. Ma'am, I was told this was common property. It is, she snapped. No, I said, stepping in front of the path. It's not. This is my land. You are trespassing, and so is anyone who follows you onto this trail. Steve spoke up. We had a vote. Majority of the HOA agreed the lake is a shared landmark. I blinked at him. I'm not in your HOA. Janet smiled sweetly and waved her folder in my face. According to recent neighborhood boundary revisions, your property might now fall within our management range. You forged paperwork? I said. She just smiled wider. That's when I noticed Marlene slipping something into the gate latch. A bolt cutter. She started cutting. I bolted down the hill, shouting, "Where are you? Stop it. That's destruction of private property." But it was too late. The bolt snapped. The gate creaked open. Janet tossed the broken lock aside like it was trash, and one by one, they began marching toward the trail like they owned it. I yelled. Buck barked, but no one listened. They reached the clearing. Janet stood at the front of the deck, posed like a queen returning to her summer palace. Except the door was still locked, and what happened next was exactly what I hoped would happen. Because in preparation the night before, I had installed something special. A loud screeching siren. The moment her hand touched the handle, the alarm went off like a tornado warning, echoing across the entire lake, red lights flashing around the cabin roof. Janet screamed, stumbled backward, and fell flat on her butt in the grass. Marlene screamed too, nearly dropping her purse. Steve ran. The rent cop looked like he wanted to disappear. And me? I walked into the clearing with my phone recording the entire thing. Oh, did I forget to mention that's a trespasser alert alarm? Every movement at the door is live streamed to the sheriff's office now. Janet's face turned chalk white. You had no right. No, I said you had no right. I pointed at the camera bolted above the cabin. It's all recorded. Your face, the bolt cutters, the fake folder, the attempt to enter my cabin. She looked ready to faint. Then her voice came out in a trembling whisper. You can't press charges. This was a misunderstanding. I walked closer, speaking slowly. I warned you repeatedly. I told you this wasn't your land, and now you've damaged my gate, attempted an illegal entry, and endangered everyone you dragged into this circus. Her guests, who'd been waiting at the end of the trail with coolers and folding chairs, were already retreating. Steve was halfway to his car. Marlene started crying. I didn't know. Janet said we had full permission. Janet stood up slowly, brushing dirt off her designer pants. But before she could say another word, 2 sheriff trucks rolled up behind my fence, lights flashing. Apparently, the alarm worked faster than I expected. Deputy Harris stepped out, broad man, kind voice, but with zero tolerance for nonsense. Mr. Anderson, we received your alert, he said. You all right? I nodded. I've got footage. Trespass, property damage, threats. Janet stepped forward, her voice breaking. Officer, there must be some confusion. We were just Deputy Harris held up a hand. Ma'am, I'll need you and your group to remain here while we review the footage. She gulped. But what happened next was something none of us expected. As Harris watched the footage from my phone and cross-checked it with his department tablet, his expression turned from calm to stern. Then he said 4 words I'll never forget. Everyone stay right here because apparently Janet had already done this before to another neighbor just last year. But this time there were criminal charges pending, and with that bombshell hanging in the air, the sheriff walked to his truck to call it in. And Janet, she began to unravel right before our eyes. Janet's confident smirk had completely vanished. Her arms were folded tightly over her chest, but it wasn't the usual haughty stance she used to make herself feel taller. No, this time it was the kind of defensive posture someone uses when they feel trapped. Deputy Harris finished speaking into his radio, then turned to us, his face unreadable. Janet Morrison, he said slowly, you're being detained for questioning regarding multiple reports of trespassing, property damage, and harassment under Wyoming state law. You are not under arrest yet, but you're not allowed to leave until this is sorted out. Janet's jaw dropped. You can't be serious, she hissed. I'm the HOA president, and that means nothing out here. Harris replied firmly. You have no jurisdiction on private land. Steve, who had returned from his failed escape attempt, spoke up. Deputy, she told us she had the right. I wouldn't have come if I knew. I'm not interested in what she told you, Harris said. I'm interested in the law, and right now you all broke it. Marlene was shaking. Janet, for the first time since I'd met her, was speechless. I should have felt triumphant, but honestly, I just felt tired. I didn't want drama. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to live in peace on my land in my cabin with my dog. That's why I bought this ranch in the first place. Deputy Harris asked to review the cabin's security footage directly. I gave him access and we walked to the porch where I had an outdoor screen connected to the cabin system. We watched it together. The cameras had captured everything. Janet arriving, directing people around like she was choreographing a play, Marlene cutting the gate lock, the group storming up the path, and Janet reaching for the doorknob just before the siren went off. Then the part that really sealed it, the video showed Janet pointing at the trail and shouting, "Cut it! I don't care. He'll never do anything. I run this place. Deputy Harris stood silently for a second. Then he turned to me. You want to press charges? I stared at the screen, then at Janet, then at the group of confused, mostly embarrassed HOA board members. They looked like school kids who followed the wrong class clown into a bad prank. I'm not sure yet, I said, but I do want a restraining order. You got it. He nodded. Janet opened her mouth again, but Harris held up his hand. Don't say another word unless you want to make this worse. She clamped her lips shut and looked down. Eventually, after a full incident report was filed, he instructed them to leave. He made it very clear they were not allowed back on my property under any circumstance. He even offered to install an official no trespassing notice from the county sheriff's department on my front gate free of charge. I thanked him and walked back toward the porch. As the group of cars started pulling away, I noticed Steve roll down his window. Sorry, Cole, he said. She told us you were part of the HOA now. We didn't know. I nodded. Just don't let her rope you into her nonsense again. I won't, he said. You were right all along. By late afternoon, I was finally alone again. The sun was sinking low over the lake, golden light dancing on the water, and the cabin stood still and silent like nothing had happened. I poured myself a glass of iced tea, sat down in the rocking chair on my porch, and let Buck rest his head on my boot. Finally, some peace, but it didn't last long. The next day, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no stamps, just my name written in capital letters, taped to my gate. Inside, one photo, a grainy image of me sitting shirtless by the lake, taken from a long distance, probably through a zoom lens, and under it, a single sentence typed in bold font. You should be careful, Mr. Anderson. Not everyone plays by your rules. I stared at the letter for a long time. My hands clenched the paper so hard it crumpled, because now this wasn't just HOA drama. It was personal and someone was watching me. I stood at the gate holding that creepy letter for several minutes, just staring at the photo. The image itself was low quality, clearly taken from a distance, maybe from the edge of the woods, but it chilled me to my core. There I was, shirtless, drinking from a bottle of water by the lake, completely unaware that someone had been watching me and taking pictures. Buck stood beside me, his tail stiff, ears twitching. He could tell something was wrong. I scanned the trees beyond the fence. Nothing moved, not even the wind. This wasn't just HOA meddling anymore. This was a threat. I grabbed the envelope, slipped on my boots, and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Harris met me at the front desk, took one look at the picture, and let out a slow whistle. We're past HOA complaints now, he said grimly. This is stalking, and it's serious. He took the letter and photo into evidence and filed a full report. A deputy was assigned to drive past the ranch daily, and Harris gave me a direct contact line for emergencies. You think it's Janet? I asked. She's under watch, Harris replied. I don't think she's dumb enough to do this while already facing trespassing charges. But someone else? Maybe someone trying to protect her reputation. Or, he paused, maybe someone worse. That night I installed motion lights and more cameras. Every tree within 100 yards of the cabin now had eyes on it. I even mounted a floodlight near the lake. I wasn't taking chances. The next few days passed without incident. Peaceful, almost too peaceful. I finished a few woodworking orders, restocked supplies, and even gave Buck a bath. But I couldn't relax. That letter haunted me. Someone out there had crossed a line, and they were waiting. Then on Friday evening, it happened again. Just after sunset, Buck began barking wildly at the back edge of the property near the trees that bordered the HOA development. I grabbed my flashlight and rifle and ran toward the noise. There were tracks in the dirt, fresh human boots. Whoever it was had been standing just inside the tree I'm watching, but they were gone now. I followed the prints for a while, weaving through the tall pines until they suddenly disappeared near a small stone outcrop, like the person had jumped off the trail and vanished. When I returned to the cabin, I checked the camera footage, and what I saw chilled me worse than the first letter. At 6:13 p.m., a figure stepped out of the trees wearing a hoodie, face covered by a scarf. They stood there perfectly still, just watching the cabin for nearly 5 minutes. Then they raised a hand and waved at the camera. They knew they were being watched and they didn't care. I sent the footage to Deputy Harris immediately. "We've got a bigger problem," he replied over the phone. "That's not Janet. I've seen this kind of behavior before. It's intimidation. By who? We're going to find out, but keep your gun loaded and don't go anywhere alone." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I made a decision. I drove straight to the HOA headquarters in town. The board rented a tiny office above a bakery. I didn't call ahead. I didn't knock politely. I walked in, slammed the photo letter on the table, and looked Janet Morrison square in the eye. "What did you start?" She looked up from her coffee slowly, the color draining from her cheeks when she saw the photo. Where did you get this? It was taped to my gate." "That's not from me," she said, voice shaky. "Then tell me who it is." "I don't know," she stammered. "Maybe someone on the board. Maybe someone upset you, embarrassed me." I leaned closer. "This isn't about embarrassment anymore, Janet. Someone is playing a dangerous game, and if I catch them near my ranch again, I'm not calling the sheriff. I'll deal with it myself." Janet swallowed hard. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "No," I said, "but you lit the fire. Now the flames are spreading." I left without another word. As I drove home, I passed the HOA clubhouse near the lake development, and that's when I noticed something that stopped me cold. There was a man sitting on the clubhouse porch, hoodie, scarf, just like the figure in the footage. He was leaning against the railing facing my truck as I drove by, and though his face was hidden, I could feel his eyes on me. He raised a hand and waved exactly like the camera footage. I slammed the brakes, jumped out of the truck, but by the time I reached the porch, he was gone. Vanished. No footprints, no sound, nothing but the faint smell of cigarette smoke, and on the bench another envelope. Inside, a screenshot from my cabin's security cam from the inside. My heart stopped. The only way to get that angle was if someone had been inside the cabin, and that meant someone had the key or picked the lock. I stood frozen on the HOA clubhouse porch, staring at the screenshot in my hands. My own cabin, my own living room, shot from an angle behind the fireplace, an angle no camera I'd installed could possibly cover. The date stamp on the bottom corner 2 nights ago, time 2:46 a.m. Whoever had taken it had been inside while I was sleeping upstairs. I felt sick. My mind raced. I hadn't seen signs of forced entry. The locks were solid. The windows hadn't been cracked. The cabin alarm system hadn't triggered that night. And Buck hadn't barked, not even once. That only meant one thing. Whoever it was had moved like a ghost. I rushed back to my truck, speeding all the way home, heart hammering in my chest. When I arrived, I kicked the cabin door open and scanned every corner. Closets, crawl space, under the bed, attic, even the chimney flue. Nothing. No signs of intrusion. No foreign fingerprints. Not a single thing out of place. But they had been here watching me sleep, taking photos. Buck paced anxiously, sniffing the doorframe. Then I remembered the spare key. I kept an old, rusted key inside a hollowed-out log behind the cabin, the same place I used to keep it before I installed smart locks. I hadn't touched that key in months, just in case the tech ever failed. I sprinted to the log, empty. The key was gone. I ran back to my tool bench and checked the master lock control. There was a manual override 2 nights ago. Someone had used the backup key to bypass the system. My head spun. Only 2 people besides me knew that hiding spot, my late father and Janet Morrison. Because last fall, during a moment of weakness, I had tried to make peace. She'd shown up with fresh lemonade and claimed she wanted to understand the real Cole. We chatted on the back porch, and when I left to grab her a chair, I saw her glancing curiously toward the log. I didn't think much of it back then, but now it was crystal clear. Even if Janet hadn't personally entered the cabin, she must have shared what she saw with someone who took that knowledge and used it. But who? I couldn't go to Deputy Harris again without proof. He'd help me, yes, but he couldn't charge a shadow. I needed to bait them, so I set a trap. That night I left the cabin door unlocked on purpose. Then I moved into the barn loft 200 feet away, where I had a full view of the cabin. No lights, no noise, just me, Buck, and my rifle. I didn't sleep, not even for a second, and at 3:12 a.m., I saw the glint, a tiny flicker of light, maybe a flashlight, through the cabin window. Someone was inside. I lifted the binoculars. A figure, hooded, gloved, walked through my living room like they belonged there. They went to the fireplace, paused, and bent down. Exactly the same angle the last photo had been taken from. They were going to take another, but this time I was ready. I hit a switch on the remote in my hand. Inside the cabin, every single floodlight and camera I had installed lit up like a stadium. Sirens screamed. Red and blue lights strobed. The figure flinched, dropped the phone in their hand, and tried to run. But I was already at the back door. Freeze. They stumbled through the kitchen, jumped off the porch, and bolted into the trees. I chased them. Buck was right behind me, snarling and howling. I pushed my legs harder than I had in years, the branches whipping past me. The intruder dashed into the clearing near the lake and tripped on a root. Buck lunged, catching the sleeve of their hoodie and yanking hard. They screamed. I caught up, panting hard, and yanked the hood down. My jaw dropped. It wasn't a stranger. It was Todd Morrison, Janet's 24-year-old son. The same smug kid I'd seen a couple times loitering around the HOA clubhouse. The same guy who bragged to his friends about controlling the neighborhood because his mom ran everything. Now he was on the ground, face cut from branches, eyes wide with panic. "Cole, man, it was just a prank." I didn't respond. Instead, I called Harris. The sheriff himself answered. 20 minutes later, Todd was cuffed and sitting in the back of a squad car. I gave the sheriff the footage, the dropped phone, and even the recovered camera shots from my cabin system. Todd kept babbling. "My mom said you were paranoid. She said the cabin was part of the community. I thought I was just messing with some old dude who hated rules." Harris cut him off. "You broke into a home, son, multiple times. You stalked a homeowner. You're lucky you weren't shot." Todd looked like he was going to cry, but the real bombshell came later when Harris checked the phone. It had dozens of photos of me, my cabin, my truck, even of Buck, all time-stamped, all geotagged. And guess what? There were messages, dozens of messages from Janet encouraging him, telling him how to avoid the cameras, where to find the key, what nights I usually slept heavily. "She's done," Harris muttered, scrolling through the evidence. "She's not just HOA president anymore. She's now a co-conspirator in a criminal case." I finally exhaled. After all the harassment, the fake citations, the trespassing, the stalking, the truth was finally coming out. But as Harris drove away with Todd in custody and promised to file charges against Janet by morning, I returned to the porch of my cabin. For the first time in months, it was quiet. Too quiet. Because just as I sat down to take a breath, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message. A video, grainy, shaky, taken from a drone. It showed me standing on my porch. The message below it read, "Janet was only the beginning." I stared out into the dark skies above the ranch and realized this wasn't over yet. The drone footage shook me. My own image sitting on the porch in real time, unaware, was burned into the screen of my phone. I could hear the crickets in the background, the gentle sway of the pine trees. Buck lifted his head, ears twitching at the faint buzzing above us. That's when I heard it too, a low hum, mechanical somewhere in the sky. I looked up, scanning between the clouds and the tree, and finally spotted it. A small drone, barely the size of a dinner plate, hovering silently just beyond the edge of the property. It dipped for a moment, circled, then zipped back toward the HOA neighborhood. I didn't move. I didn't blink because the message attached to the video wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. Janet was only the beginning. For months, I thought this battle was about an entitled HOA president drunk on power. But now this was something bigger. Someone wanted more than just my lake cabin. They wanted control. The next morning, I drove straight to the sheriff's office with the footage. Deputy Harris pulled me into a private room, locking the door behind us. "We traced the number that sent you the message," he said. "It's been bouncing off proxies spoofed through 3 servers all unregistered. Whoever did this, they know how to hide." "Why target me?" I asked. He hesitated. "I think it's less about you and more about what you represent. Independence, refusal to obey the HOA. You embarrassed their president publicly, got her son arrested and exposed their corruption." He slid a file across the desk. Inside were several other complaints filed in the past year. Neighbors who claimed they were harassed into selling land near the HOA, small parcels, lakeside lots. One woman reported being threatened anonymously if she didn't relocate. Janet and the board had been quietly trying to expand HOA control, Harris explained. But your ranch, it's too big, too important, and you fought back. I sat back in my chair. They want to turn my ranch into something, I muttered. He nodded. We suspect plans for a private resort, golf course, luxury cabins, lake events, and your cabin sits at the center of it all. A chill went down my spine. That night I reviewed my cabin logs. The drone had returned twice, once at midnight, once at 4 a.m. Whoever was controlling it wasn't giving up. I made one more decision. It was time to expose everything. The next morning I launched a website, myrancheshost.com, with all the footage, letters, fake notices, voice memos, and drone videos. I uploaded everything, even testimonies from 2 other neighbors who came forward after Todd's arrest. Then I sent the link to every local news station, radio show, and podcast I could find. It went viral in 24 hours. People were shocked, outraged. The story of an HOA trying to bully a rancher out of his own land struck a nerve. Retired vet battles, rogue HOA, Wyoming rancher exposes hidden power grab, caught on tape. HOA president's son breaks into private cabin. By day 3, Janet Morrison was officially removed as HOA president. By day 5, she and her son were both charged with multiple counts, trespassing, conspiracy, stalking, and property damage. But the final blow came the following week. A whistleblower from the HOA board came forward. A man named Doug, who had been quiet through the entire ordeal. He revealed that a real estate investment group had been funneling money to Janet and a few board members under the table. Their goal, force out independent landowners, snap up the properties at discounted rates, develop a high-end private resort community, and charge premium membership fees. My cabin, my lake, the trees my father planted with his bare hands. They were just amenities on someone else's blueprint until I stopped them. The sheriff launched an investigation. Arrests were made, homes were searched, laptops seized, and within a month, the entire HOA board was dismantled. What replaced it? A temporary committee of local homeowners, real ones, honest ones, people who knew what it meant to live here, not just rule over others. As for me, I was offered money, a lot of it. Several buyers, some legitimate, some shady, came knocking on my door. But I turned them all down because this ranch wasn't for sale. Not now, not ever. I built new fences, stronger locks, even wired an underground sensor system from the edge of the lake to the front gate, courtesy of a few military buddies who owed me favors. But most importantly, I finally had my peace. One evening, I stood on my porch, Buck resting beside me, and watched the sun dip below the hills. The sky turned orange and gold, the lake shimmering like a mirror. No cameras, no drones, no shouting, just silence. But even now, sometimes when the wind blows through the trees a certain way, I remember that letter. Janet was only the beginning, and I know there are always others out there. People who think they're above the rules, who want to take what isn't theirs, who think they can bully folks into silence. But not on my watch, not on my ranch. Because out here, we don't bend, we don't break, we stand our ground. And if anyone ever tries to climb my fence again, they'd better hope the sirens warn them in time. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Tap the like and follow button if you love stories where the underdog wins big.